Got to get over to that meth and work on it.
TV.
All right, this is a big story bubbling up over the weekend. Top Republican Congressman Peter King now accusing Senator Rand Paul of lying and misleading Americans on the NSA surveillance program. The Kentucky senator threatening to sue the federal agency over their intelligence gathering practices. But King says that Senator Paul, he believes, has no idea what he's talking about. Watch some of this.
If we listen to Rand Paul and follow his policies, Americans could die, because the NSA has stopped attacks against the United States. Right here in New York, the Zazi attempted subway attack in 2009 with liquid explosives was stopped primarily by the NSA. If Rand Paul had been around and we listened to him, hundreds of New Yorkers would be dead today. That would be on his conscience. Or maybe it wouldn't be. Maybe it wouldn't bother him. I don't know. The fact is, he has to realize there's an impact from what he says. If we follow his policies, it's going to lead to the death of Americans.
Is he right? And did he step over the line there? Kirsten Powers is the Daily Beast columnist, and Katie Pavlik is the news editor at townhall.com. Both are Fox News contributors. Kirsten, let me start with you. Is he right?
Well, I do. You asked, is it over the line? I do think he went a little bit over the line there. I heard what Rand Paul said in his interview, and there was nothing, there was nothing that was wrong about it. And he, Peter King seems to be upset that Rand Paul thinks that James Clapper should be prosecuted for lying to Congress. And I don't understand what is so radical about that idea that if you lie to Congress, which is a felony, you should be prosecuted regardless of who you are. And I think Rand Paul is just calling for there to be one standard for Americans, not one standard for Edward Snowden and one standard for James Clapper.
Yeah, I mean, that is a valid point. And he's referring, I should point out to folks at home, to the moment when Ron Wyden questioned James Clapper, the DNI, and asked him if there was any broad reach program that was collecting the phone data of Americans, and he said not wittingly, were his words. So, Katie, what do you make of the comments of Peter King over the weekend?
Well, I think it's a little ridiculous for Peter King to suggest that essentially the blood of Americans would be on the hands of Rand Paul simply because Rand Paul is addressing an issue that polling shows many Americans are concerned about. An independent review showed that the NSA actually doesn't necessarily need to be collecting all of the data from every single American cell phone to prevent terrorist attacks. Not to mention, we had a federal judge just a couple of weeks ago saying that, he thinks it's unconstitutional and that the government hasn't given enough proof to show they need this program and this mass collection of data to prevent terrorist attacks. And so, Peter King says he wants to run for president, but if he's going to tell Americans that their, privacy concerns shouldn't be addressed when it comes to the NSA, then he's going to have a real problem with that.
Yeah, I think one of the things that needs to be spelled out more clearly is how effective the program has been. And Peter King cited the Zazi case. There's a lot of controversy over that case, and a lot of feeling that the information that was pulled off Zazi's laptop and email surveillance was really the sort of meat of what allowed them to bring him in, and that the phone call collection was peripheral to that case. And as I say, it's controversial. Not everyone's going to agree on that. But, Kirsten, I think back to what happened in Boston and the failings of this system in a classic case where it should have been detected. The whole NSA argument is laid out to catch people in the situation that the Boston bombers were in, where they're making phone calls back and forth to other countries and talking to terrorists. And it failed. And there's very little discussion of that.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a false choice. I've never heard the way that we were just hearing, the way that Congressman King was portraying Rand Paul's position, I don't think is actually Rand Paul's position. I don't think Rand Paul is against protecting the United States. I just think he thinks the NSA needs to, work within the bounds of the Constitution. And it is possible to do that and catch terrorists. And I think you're right, Martha. Also, there's a lot of claims made. Keith Alexander, of course, went before Congress and also claimed that 54 terrorist attacks had been broken up. And it turned out in the end that wasn't really true. And a lot of the ones he was talking about weren't even in the U.S. So I think that there's been a lot of false claims. Katie's absolutely right in terms of the criticism that's come from even the FISA court. We wouldn't even know that the FISA court had criticized the NSA if it wasn't for Edward Snowden. Yeah, that's right. That they then declassified that information. And here you have the FISA court saying you're over-collecting. They're very concerned, that there are abuses going on, and so I think that Rand Paul is on the right side of this in my book, and I don't know what Peter King is talking about.
I mean, there seems to be a very frantic, on the part of the administration and also in Peter King in this case is siding with them, sort of effort to say, just don't look into this stuff.
Right.
Just trust us. It's really good that we have this, and it's extremely dangerous if we don't. And Katie, I think people aren't satisfied with that answer anymore.
Well, and they shouldn't be. And when you have James Clapper, essentially either lying to the American people about what kind of data of their personal data being collected, or grossly misleading the American people about their data being collected, and us finding out that they actually are collecting data when he said that they weren't, they should be skeptical of the government and then coming and saying, just trust us. And let's not forget that this isn't just Rand Paul, and this isn't just the American people. Representative Jim Sensenbrenner, who helped write the Patriot Act when all this NSA information came out about the collection of all of this data, he said this is not what the Patriot Act intended, and we need reform. And a lot of people aren't calling for the destruction of the NSA, but they are saying that we need more government oversight, and saying that it needs to be tailored to terrorism, not just simply collecting all the data on Americans who aren't involved in terrorist activities.
Laying out in a really clear manner how it's effective would go a really long way, and I'm not sure that information is necessarily out there. It's a big question mark. So we'll see where it goes. Thank you very much, Katie, Kirsten. Great to see you both.